Hello, my friends. Eric Feltus here, life coach, speaker, actor, and host of The Great Unbecoming. This is a show about stories of unlearning. What did you let go of in order to become the person you are today? And what did you gain and learn as well? This is a show about letting go of stories that no longer serve us and stepping into our own authenticity. It's about unbecoming what society says you should be and remembering who you are and who you are meant to be. So sit back, relax, and welcome to The Great Unbecoming. Y'all, before I became a life coach that helps other gay men free themselves from church shame, I cannot tell you how many times I cried in my car, screaming to God, what is my purpose? Why am I on this planet? Why is nothing happening? And so I am so delighted to have a guest with us today who specializes in this work, in living a purpose-driven life. But before I introduce him or let him talk, y'all know how much I like to talk. Let me read his bio so you know what we are talking about and who we are talking about, I should say. Kevin Lee is known as a purpose coach, spiritual intuitive, a #1 international bestselling 2-time author, a motivational impact speaker, and was certified as a transformational trainer by Lisa Nichols. His keynotes and workshops include discovering your divine purpose, purpose-driven leadership, spiritual business development, gratitude, and self-love. His mind, body, spirit teachings include consciousness, the soul self, death and dying, and the afterlife. As featured on NBC, CBS, Fox, and Chicago News, this 2-time spiritual author's latest book, Your Divine Purpose, A Journey to Fulfillment and Legacy. I'm going to say that again so I don't mess up the title in the middle of saying it. Your Divine Purpose, A Journey to Fulfillment and Legacy, has earned his high praise from readers. Kevin has been trained extensively and been certified by some notable names such as Lisa Nichols, John C. Maxwell, and the prophet coach herself, Susie Carder. He has also produced 2 professional meditation albums, and he can also be found in his podcast, Live with Kevin Lee, interviewing leaders, luminaries, and sharing enlightening lessons for his audiences. And then I will drop all of his show notes in the notes, and but just so you know, you can go to www.iamkevinlee, that's lee.com, to learn more information about him. Mr. Kevin Lee, thank you so much for joining us on The Great Unbecoming.
That's a beautiful introduction. Thank you.
Don't you love hearing about yourself? Because I know I love hearing about myself.
And so, like you said, you froze.
I know. I literally, as soon as I started, okay, y'all, right before we started recording.
I'll just wait here until you come back to me.
Oh God, you still can't hear me, Kevin?
Nothing? I can hear you now.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Literally, y'all, right before we started recording, I was like, sometimes Riverside, like it sounds great and it's all this stuff. And then you start recording and we just don't hear each other. I don't know. This is why I'm taking a break. Speaking of taking a break, I want to say this before I forget, y'all. We are in November now, and this is the second to the last episode of season 1. I will be back for one more episode next week, and then I am taking a much-needed vacation until further notice, as much as I love all of you. As much as I love all of these technical glitches, Kevin, it's the reason I do it. It helps me to practice my patience.
So when we freeze like that, we're not like that politician up in Washington, right? Who's the gentleman? I don't even know his name because I don't even follow politics.
We don't need to say their names.
Good.
Yeah. The difference is that even if we freeze, we're not lying. So we've got that going for us. Kevin, I'm so happy to have you here, as messy as this intro was. And one reason is because this is something that I hear from so many men that I work with is I don't know what my purpose is. And it's like not only do they want to know what their purpose is, but they know what they want, which is clarity of purpose. They don't know how to get it. So I love that you've built so much of your career on helping people to find their purpose. I'm curious to know for you, how did you get to where you are? Like how did you clarify your own purpose to get you to help others to find theirs?
Sure. No, that's a great question because probably 15, maybe even 17 years ago, it was 2007. And this was a time where I had literally just achieved a life dream. I became a nurse anesthetist. It's what I'd always wanted to do. And I had already been a nurse for many, many years, a registered nurse. I'd been working critical care, nursing, all kinds of shock trauma, doing all that kind of stuff. And I just thought, you know what? I'm about to go sailing through life. I'll make some good money and do what I want to do. And at that time, I was very much against the concept of God. I didn't like churches. I didn't like preachers. I didn't like religion. I didn't like how I'd been treated my whole life. I was done with it. And it's really interesting how the universe works, because within literally, I would say about 3 months, I had a mystical experience. And it was not something I was looking for. It was not something I wanted. It was not something I was even comfortable with. There was an element in the experience. I was at home one day, and and the best way to describe it, I'm going to use some Christian terminology because I grew up Southern Baptist. It felt like what they talk about, the Holy Spirit enters the room and the space becomes electric. The hair stands up on your body, or something comes around you that feels alive, or in some way it's just a living energy. And that presence came around me, and I could feel that I was safe. I didn't feel threatened by it. So I just kind of went with it. I didn't have anything else really to do. And I basically was guided. I heard a voice in my head. It wasn't like a physical voice. It was more like a memory surfaced. And I could just hear, get in your car. You have to drive. And I remember thinking, what the heck is this about? I can't stand driving. I don't even like to drive myself around town. Why am I going to get in my car? And so I did. Like I said, had nothing better to do. And Snarky Kevin came out. So I shut the door and I said, now what? And I swear I heard in my head, drive south. So I thought, okay, here we go. So at the time, I didn't realize I knew exactly where to go. I entered in a neighboring town. I lived at the time, and still do, in Fort Lauderdale. And I left Fort Lauderdale, drove past our airport, and went to a neighboring town called Dania Beach. And as I entered this very tiny, sleepy little town, I noticed there were a bunch of shops. I was looking at the shops, and there was a sign that said Metaphysical Chapel. And I remember thinking, I don't know what those words are. I know the word chapel is like a small church, like a wedding church, something like that. And then the word metaphysical, I thought, wait a minute, that's like that word psychic. And that's not good. I don't need to be a part of that. And it really weirded me out. I didn't like the sign. The concept for me was like angels and demons. Somehow they were both in that building, and I didn't like that. So I tried to avoid it. And as I drove past it, and suddenly that presence came in my car, and I could hear in my head, turn around. And I could feel, there were feelings with it this time, which was a sense of urgency and someone being very adamant to demand that I turn around. And I did. So I went to this property and discovered it was a little church. And I didn't go into the building, but I went back a few weeks later and discovered what became eventually the ministry that I led for many, many years, and grew it successfully. And it was an old church of spiritualists, metaphysicians. They were very much into the afterlife, everything psychic. And it was very strange to me, because I had always wanted to believe in that, but I was taught it was wrong and evil. But also I was taught it was just, a bunch of frauds, magic tricks. And so the logical Kevin fought it a lot. And then there was the soulful Kevin deep inside that said, you found your home. Stop being so difficult. This place will help you. I could feel that. And it was just a few months later, probably around Christmas. So this happened in June, the first encounter. And then around Christmas time, I went to a special event where there was a prophet or a medium. And there was a message that came through that was highly appropriate, because what I didn't share with you was that the day before, I had decided I was never going back to that place. They hadn't done a good job teaching me, educating me on the concepts of their beliefs or metaphysics, spiritualism, the afterlife. And I thought, you know what? I believe I'm a good person. I know in my heart I am. And I believe my soul is a good soul, and I want to protect it. So I was literally I was about to run out the door. Because I was still programmed by my old, very rural, very conservative beliefs.
Hmm.
And if nothing else, even though I had always been taught God hated me, I was an abomination, I was evil incarnate, and all these things I've been told, there was still something that said, you know what, there's still hope for me.
Hmm.
I've always been an optimist, and I've managed to walk through the fires. I got burned and bumped and battered and thrown around, but I still managed to believe there's got to be a chance for goodness in the world. And so anyway, at this experience, a message came through, which was very peculiar because it came from Mother Mary. And it was not somebody I prayed to. It was not somebody that I was even thinking about. I knew who she was, and I'd always loved the stories, but her message was, Kevin, you have free will. And you can stay at the church you have found. She said, actually, that we guided you to, but you also can leave. You have free will. You get to make the decision. But if you stay, you don't realize the lives that you will change. You'll change tens of thousands of lives in your lifetime. You have so much potential. And it was a very peculiar message because I thought, well, is this legit? Is that even possible that such a message could come through? Or is this just a magic trick? What the heck is this? How did this guy know who I was and what had happened? And the way he phrased things, how could he possibly have known where I was, where there were hardly 10 people at any time in that little church? It was very peculiar. And so I went home. I received a beautiful painting that Spirit created in that encounter, which was a very rare experience for me. And I thought, I just had a hard time buying that Spirit could actually materialize a painting
Wait, say more.
for me.
How did you receive the painting? You just threw that in.
I know, but I had to say it because I've spoken about it and written about it, and I don't want to take up too much time on that. It's in my book, but what I will say is this. Just like in the Bible, where it speaks about the 10 commandments coming forward to Moses, right? What is that? Spirit writing. When it talks about David who was in the dungeons in the book of, or Daniel in the dungeon, and King Belshazzar, his queen, said, if you want to interpret the writing on the wall that has just appeared in your temple, you need to go to the dungeon and get Daniel. And Daniel interpreted it. And he predicted the king's death in 24 hours. And what he did was he read what was on the wall and interpreted it, and it came to pass. And so those are a couple of examples of materialized spirit writing and spiritual images, if you will. And so there's other references, but basically that phenomena is a legitimate phenomena. I've witnessed it with my own eyes. And I received this beautiful painting on a little bitty card of Mother Mary and Father Joseph. It was so bizarre to me. I didn't know what to think about this whole experience. And so I left that experience. And as I drove home, I was bawling. And I kept thinking, why are you crying? What is this all about? You're literally out of this. You won't even have to go back to anything like this again. Why are you so upset? And I realized by the time I got home that I had had a total transformation. The words that I was given, the evidence that was given, the messages, it was so much synchronistic confirmation for me on a spiritual level that being that I'd never prayed to, this Mother Mary, that the message that came through was so appropriate in my life that no one knew what was going on in my life. And yet what she didn't say to me was that I was a sinner, that I was evil, that I was an abomination, that God didn't love me. What she said was she put the power of the choice into my existence. And I had never been taught that growing up as a young man in Texas. And my family certainly didn't believe that concept. The power was in the preacher. And beyond that, the power was in God. And so this whole experience in this new world religion, spiritualism, it really rocked my world. And I realized whatever the heck just happened to me, I'm not afraid of death anymore. I'm not afraid of the spirit world, whatever that may be. I may not understand it, but I'm not afraid of it now. I know that I'm not afraid of my soul being at risk of going to some place they call hell. That's not a concept for me anymore. But I realized that so many things that I had been told and misled by the mistruth from society, religion, culture, community, family. So much of the fear and pain associated with all that was gone. And it was the first time I felt so light, and so I felt energized. I felt elevated. I felt like there was so much hope for my future. And I remember sitting there crying and holding this little strange little card with the image. And I remember saying out loud, God, whatever just happened to me, and whatever this thing is, I guarantee you I'm going to devote myself to learn about it. And I want to serve people and help people to experience what I just experienced, because, I feel it. Because if I can be changed, and I can be that difficult and logical and whatnot, and I can have this transformation in this moment, I want to do that for other people. And I didn't really know what that meant, but that's the words that I said. And what really unfolded was, you know what? I may not understand a lot about religion or church at the time, but what I can do is I can get people together and tell my story. And so I started getting people together and bringing them to this tiny little church that was falling apart. They didn't know how to run a business. They didn't know how to educate people. And that's what I taught them how to do. And so it became so fulfilling to me to be able to share this crazy life that I had where my family basically has disowned me because of being gay. And much less they barely even know what I believe, because I knew they couldn't tolerate that. And so just sharing the story, the difficulty of growing up and not ever really feeling like I was a whole human being. And yet this new community and these new people that I was encountering in the world of spiritualism and metaphysics, they were so accepting. And I quickly realized that they were just like me. They were battered and beaten down and chased out of other churches and had the Bible thrown at them, literally. And yet they were still willing to approach the world of spirit or to have a spiritual understanding of what life and reality is. But they would just set all the other stuff aside. And they just wanted people to accept them for who they were, to not judge them, and just to love them. And also they were looking for inspiration and guidance. And I could definitely give them that. I love to talk. I love to share. I love to give them hope. And that's really how it all began. And I thought, wait a minute, my purpose, I can help people find their purpose kind of like I did. And that's how it began. So when I would put on a workshop, I'd say, what do you want to learn? I've learned a lot. I've spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of sacrifice to kind of evolve. What do you need? And let me see what I have inside my mind, my experience. How can that help you? And that's really how a lot of the classes evolved into bigger workshops, and then lectures, sermons, presentations. I travel. It really grew. And my church grew. And I was shocked because I had never been involved with building a church. I just used some basic business principles, and I was nice to people, so they came back.
Go figure. Isn't it funny when we use kindness and not fear?
You know, funny, that just came out of my mouth, and it reminded me of what I didn't say, which was when I walked into that little church on the first day, the Metaphysical Chapel of South Florida. I remember saying to somebody, one of the I don't know, team leaders who greeted me, the welcome team or whoever it was, and I said, where are all the black people? And I said, or the Hispanic people? And she said, oh, they don't come back. I said, well, what do you mean they don't come back? She goes, they never come back. I said, how do you treat them? And she goes, well, I don't know. We don't really interact too much because we don't want to scare them. So we just kind of leave them be. And I thought, you literally are avoiding them. And I said, where are all the families with kids? There should be kids and families here. And they said, well, they never come back. And I kept hearing they never come back. And I thought, what are you people doing here? It was such an old white church. I said, I guarantee you I'm going to change this, because I'm not having an old white church. I don't want to be a part of that. I want a church of all people, of all kinds, all beliefs. I don't care if you're of another religion. Come and sit in my church and let's talk and have an experience, a spiritual experience, a spiritual gathering, and just be respectful of what I believe and what I teach, and I'll be respectful of what you believe and what you put forward. And that's really how I led it. I just reminded people to be respectful in the space.
Hmm. And in respecting others, you respect yourself. I'm hearing
Yeah.
a lot of the way you treated yourself. It sounds like that's how you were treated. Just things I picked up on
Yeah.
through your story so far. I talk a little bit about spiritual gaslighting, and it's
What is that? Explain that.
spiritual gaslighting. So gaslighting is making someone else feel. I'm not going to be able to describe this eloquently, but it's making someone
Okay.
else feel as if it's their fault. Things like, "Oh, that's not what I
Ah,
said," or "Oh, you're being crazy," or it's
yes.
victimizing yourself. So let's say you try to hold me accountable for something I said to you that was
Mm.
out of line, and I say, "Why are you scolding me?" Okay, now I've taken your power away from you through trying to trick you, trying to diminish your feelings or make you feel crazy. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it comes from a movie from a long black and white movie from a long time ago. I want to say it might have been called Gaslight. It
Huh.
had to do with a man who was trying to make his wife feel crazy. So he would do things like turn the gaslight on and say that she did it. And he literally made her feel like she was crazy and then sent her to a psych ward.
Wow. Yes, I have experienced that.
Woo! Well, so spiritual gaslighting is gaslighting at the
Yeah.
pulpit. And, it's funny how you and I were led to believe, oh, don't believe in this nonsense. Don't believe in
Yes.
this, psychic nonsense and all this stuff. It's trickery. They're trying to get your money. What are they doing? Besides standing at the pulpit and making you feel bad about yourself and asking you for money. And I identify as Christian. I'm not discrediting
Mm.
tithing if that's what you
Yeah.
feel is right for you. I think sometimes it's
Exactly.
necessary, but and again, I'm not discrediting Christianity, but there is as much proof that the rules in Christianity or the stories in Christianity are true as there is in any other religion. It's
Yep.
just mind-boggling how hard it is for some Christians to separate beliefs
Yeah.
from facts. And when we don't know how to separate them, there's no room for celebration. There's no room for diversity. There's no room for questions. We're scolded for questioning, aren't we?
I'm listening. You froze again.
I know I did. I could tell you froze earlier too. So we're scolded for questioning. And so then you go to this small church and you think, I can't
Mm.
listen to this because that's what
Yeah.
you've been taught.
Right.
Isn't it beautiful too so I use the word Christ. Are you familiar with Richard Rohr?
No.
So Richard Rohr has written several books, but my favorite book that really changed my life is called The Universal Christ. And so he talks about this idea of Christ as being an all-encompassing, all infinitely loving that goes beyond Christianity. So when I say Christ,
Mm.
I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm
Okay,
talking
cool.
about universe, Buddha, if you will.
No, that makes
It's
sense. We use the terminology Christ consciousness.
Oh, sure, yes. This
Yeah.
sounds very New Thought Church, similar.
Yep. New thought evolved out of spiritualism. Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Mm.
So it's beautiful to me to think that with your background in Southern Baptist, I mean, I know it's not
Mm-hmm.
Catholic, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
view Mary in the same way Catholics do. However,
Right.
you come from a Christian background. You
Mm-hmm.
went to this I won't say non-Christian, but spiritual
Sure.
center, and the images shown to you were that of a Christian religion, which I think
Yes.
personally, I want your opinion on this, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel it's easy for people to think like, yep, therefore Christianity is right and everything's wrong. To me, it's so much bigger than that. To me, God is
It's
so
far bigger.
creative. It's so
Yeah.
creative. It's like, I say it, God is so creative. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
this is the language and the imagery that works for you. So I'm going to tap
Yes.
into that to speak to you. If you were Muslim,
Sure.
I'm sure you would have had a much different spiritual experience. I
It's
think
very
that's so
possible.
exciting.
Very possible. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting when we spoke a moment ago about the spiritual gaslighting. One of the things that commonly comes up in discussions and arguments, and you'll see it online in posts or in articles and such, and people will speak about, tithing is bad, or the Christian religion is the right religion and yours is the wrong religion. So there's all this like a type of gaslighting going on, but also there's what is not discussed, especially in that situation of tithing, is that the principle of tithing is more of there is two part. One, it benefits the church financially, and so there's a power control issue there, and that's why it gets really abused in very inappropriate ways and used in ways to harm people in an offensive way, not just defensive. Like, the bill's got to get paid. You need to make it your tithing.
Right.
But
So shame people
but
into tithing.
it's really a shame. It's a weapon of shame and guilt and fear. And that's what I grew up in, which was, we had the screaming preacher. We had the preacher that was, he was angry. I mean, that dude, I don't know how he didn't lose his voice. That dude yelled constantly for 30 minutes. You couldn't fall asleep because you felt like you were being yelled at. And it was a very hostile environment, but it was always, the power was always in the pulpit. The power was in the pulpit, as the preacher was the representative of divine force and had a direct connection. And you have a problem, you go to your preacher, your priest, your imam. That's what we know. But within spiritualism, within New Thought, within Spiritism, certain other religions, there's this concept which I found amazing, that power in the pulpit was shifted to the pews. Mm-hmm. And so the divine is within me because I am the expression of that divine. And that's, New Thought and those religions I just mentioned. And when you go to traditional Christian or Catholic or certain places like that, it is the total opposite. You must pray to that God figure, the God being the white man on a throne, which cracks me up every time because I friggin' love the shack that they had a black woman who was sassy and funny and loving. And I love that concept. God's not a person. God is simply an all-pervasive force. This infinite intelligence is like a cosmic mind, if you will. And we literally are a thought of it. We are the expression of it. And so, and that's how Spirit has explained it to me several times, that because I remember in the beginning, I said, have you ever met God? Did you see God? What was God wearing? And they're like, what are you talking about? God is not a person. God's not a being. God is a force. It's literally the white light, but there's a consciousness to it. And so that's how they've described it. Quite fascinating.
You know what's interesting? I don't tell this story often, and I won't go into drastic detail, but I had a spiritual awakening experience once where I didn't see this image, but I very much sensed and could visualize me. It was literally, figuratively,
Beautiful.
me walking into the room, and I knew that was Christ. And that's not saying that I'm God, but it also at the same time is saying that I am God. We're all God, right?
Right. The concept I am that I am. Yeah.
Exactly. And the recognition that I am made in the image and likeness of God.
Exactly.
I genuinely felt this presence of me and what that version of me, which you could say God, you could say highest version of self, Christ consciousness, said, thank you for not giving up on me. And that's all they said.
Wow.
And I started sobbing and I said, I would never give up on you. And I mean, it was such, I know words can't describe it, but it was such an emotionally moving experience that I dropped to the floor and I had my hands on the couch and I was sobbing. And then I got this image of, Jesus. Now this is going to sound morbid. The night before he died in Gethsemane, when he was sobbing and said, I don't want to do this, but if it's your will, then I will do it. I say morbid because this was not a scary, I feel like Jesus was scared. This is not a scary experience. It's an overwhelming experience.
Jesus had a human experience. He was human being. He just was a spiritual being having a human experience. So that's why there was the moments of questioning, or moments of fear, or moments of sadness, moments of being betrayed. He knew what Judas had to do. He told Judas to go do it. Yeah, he knew the prophecy had to be fulfilled.
You know, I've said this before. I think a danger that a lot of fundamentalist Christians make are that they humanize God too much and they dehumanize Jesus too much. Humanizing God is that sinner's in the hands of an angry God. God is angry, maybe like your abusive father is, right? Not your just general abusive father. Whereas
my father was pretty vile.
I didn't assume, but now we know. But so it's easy for you to get that image of your father and think that's what God must be like. But it's also tempting to think, well, Jesus was God, so he was perfect and blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. When I have thrown that off the shelf, no, That's why I love
Yeah.
talking about things like he was 33 when he was murdered. He knew he was going to be
Yeah.
murdered, according to the stories,
He
and
was a
he was
zealot.
scared.
Jesus was
And so
literally a
for
zealot.
me,
There's a
in that
book. That book I
recognition,
still
I
have not read.
recognize that the more I love
If I'm not mistaken,
my
the author
queerness.
is Muslim, right? Did you hear me?
So we probably spoke over each other. Say that again.
I think we did. Okay, so I was saying, you mentioned Jesus, and I said, Jesus was a zealot. And
Hmm.
there is actually a book that, if I'm not mistaken, a Muslim author, highly intelligent man, very eloquent individual. I remember seeing him in a documentary on TV, some kind of a news documentary, and they were interviewing him about that. And but he spoke about Jesus in a way to identify him that he broke the rules constantly. He
Yes.
challenged people, the authorities. He challenged the religious beliefs of the time. He was such a disruptor. And it's really fascinating because he wasn't this picture perfect individual. He was a person that could be very loving, but also very disruptive.
He
And
pissed a lot of people off.
and I just find that fascinating because that sounds like a typical human being. I know people like that.
100%. And I firmly believe that the people that crucified him 2,000 years ago are the same ones that use him as a weapon, for
Yeah.
example, against the queer community or to justify
Yeah.
their own xenophobia, homophobia, racism today.
Yes, totally. Yes, it's a
And so
nice excuse to hide behind.
when we humanize Jesus, I think we give ourselves permission to love ourselves more because we think, therefore, if Jesus can do this, I can do this. And I've recognized how important self-love is. The more I love who I am, the more I feel seen and loved by Christ. And I think that that's why that image for me was of me in that moment.
That's beautiful. Wow. No, it makes total sense. And it's interesting. A lot of times when messages come to me from Spirit through various channels, the shortest, most concise messages they're so simple and they are so profound. So once again, I've just heard another example from you, which is where there was this maybe 5 or 6 word thought sentence that came forward from you as a representation of Jesus, but yet it was so profound that there was a transformation that took place. I see it quite often.
100%. So I'm assuming, but maybe I shouldn't assume that some of the work in finding your purpose is silence and listen.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. Because what's the one thing most people don't want to do? They don't want to go back to the dark memories. They don't want to shut their eyes and sit in a quiet room by themselves for 15, much less 15 minutes, even 5 minutes.
Right.
I've had people get up and make excuses. They need to go to the restroom. I'm like, well, you just went last hour. Why do you need to go again? I think you're trying to avoid the exercise.
Well, I talk about
see
this
that
all
a
the
lot.
time.
People start.
Yeah.
I watch in and I even tell them, look, you're going to have these symptomology will appear on the edge of a breakthrough. You're going to get angry, maybe with me, maybe with your memories. You're going to get very irritated at things I'm saying. You're going to get very irritated with yourself, the whole encounter, the experience you're in. Something about the room is really going to annoy you, or the person next to you is going to really annoy you. These are moments of breakthrough. So I want you to stay and push through them. So I've seen things like that in these, in some of my workshops. It just reminds me to remind them, you're right on the precipice of a breakthrough. And just pay attention to how are you feeling, right? Irritation is a feeling.
Yes.
Annoyance is a feeling. Anger is a feeling. So you're paying attention to feelings, and most people don't want to do that because they're only aware of the extreme feelings. Happiness, definitely hunger, because I love to eat too. But things like that, anger or fear, these are the extremes, and we'll pay attention to those and try to deal with those, but we don't deal with the subtle ones. And momentary shame, or that I don't have a voice in the matter, when yes, you do have a voice. And so I think that's very appropriate for people to be aware that in the work for transformation and to discover your purpose, and even discovering your purpose, it doesn't have to be transformation, but it typically happens because you'll begin to love yourself and you'll realize, I have been tolerating way too much for my whole life. And if I begin to set non-negotiables and identify them clearly, what I will no longer tolerate and what I expect in whatever situation, person, place, or thing, if I'm setting my expectations and I have a clear goal because I've gone through the exercise, because I've gone within to find what have I stopped doing in life that I used to love as a child? Well, Kevin used to do oil paintings. I used to paint. I loved it. I haven't done it in a long time, but that's an example of something that brought me incredible joy that I really couldn't describe. I felt incredibly connected to the universe when I did it, and I was very good at a young age. But I was very embarrassed because the other boys made fun of me that I was painting, which was a girl's task. It was too girly. And so I stopped it. I stopped piano because they said it was too girly. And so I stopped a lot of things a long time ago. And a lot of times, I guarantee you, people have experienced the same things. So let's go back to those old memories. May not be pleasant. We're going to have to deal with the bullies. We're going to have to deal with the shame. And let's see, why did you have shame in that moment? Where did that originate? It didn't happen in that moment. It happened before the moment in your childhood. So let's go back to where did that begin, and who did that to you? What happened? What did you do or not do in that situation? So you really kind of take them through a process. If you're doing that in a live experience, or maybe even on an audio tape, I can guide them through a process. But a lot of times just sitting and giving them one or two areas to look at in their life for the next week's assignment is really pretty profound, because most people avoid looking at anything. So one or two discoveries is huge for people.
What I'm hearing,
and I love that.
And this is so similar. The work we do is so similar, but it's not avoiding, but rather bringing your awareness into it. It could be bringing your awareness into that discomfort that you're so used to either avoiding or talking your way out of, or shaming yourself for feeling, or numbing through other substances. I'm guilty of that. But it's also bringing your awareness into your childhood. It's bringing your awareness. You know what? And I say this to my clients all the time, but I'll share it with you. I used to use the word regress a lot with my therapist. I used to say, oh, I'm regressing. And my therapist would say, well, we're not in a time machine. We don't go backwards in time. Is it possible, although it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, but does it suit you to say, I'm experiencing unresolved trauma in a new way with a new stimuli? Something new has happened to me, which is reactivating.
That's much sexier.
Unresolved trauma. Yeah. That's not a quickie. It's not a quickie, but it's sexy. But that's good. And I always tell my clients, discomfort is not only data that you're growing, it's necessary to grow. So if you feel uncomfortable, what a great opportunity from the universe to dive into that discomfort and see what's unresolved to move forward. It's so easy for me to say this to you, Kevin, when we're recording. Don't look at me when the cameras are off and I'm like swearing in my car or in my fear journal, just cussing someone out. But again, you also have to experience those. I think that the anger it's a part of grief. And I think to avoid the anger, to try to rush the process is probably something you see as well. Like, you probably see some people that avoid it, and then you probably see other people that think, well, I'm not angry anymore. I'm ready for the next step. Well, no.
Oh, yeah.
You can't rush it, right?
Yeah, you can't rush it. No, that's so true. Very true.
Kevin, we could probably talk for hours. I mean, just looking at the notes you sent me, there's 9 more stories we could talk about. But I would love to have you back another time.
Sure.
I don't know if I want people to buy your book. So give us, without giving too much away, give us one takeaway, one thing we can do for anyone. I'll give you this. There's one person listening that's very moved by your story, that's very connected. They already have your book in their Amazon account or in their checkout, but they want they want to hear one thing from you. What's one thing they can do today if they're like, wow, I am lost. I don't have a purpose.
Well, of course, you froze right when you asked the question.
It's okay. I can repeat it.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Now, yes.
Okay, so there's one person listening that is resonating with you so much. They've never had a spiritual experience like that. They don't know what their purpose is. What would you have to say to that one person?
I'm going to make it a 2-parter. One is just begin to love yourself, because it all starts with learning to love yourself and giving yourself grace to not be perfect. We're meant to be imperfect. We're meant to be, we are souls having a human experience. Right? So we're meant to be imperfect. If we were meant to be perfect, we wouldn't even be in this dimension. We'd be in a higher dimension, having a beautifully perfect life. And so we're meant to fail in life to learn from these experiences. That's how our souls evolve. So just give yourself grace that you don't have all the answers. And all you need to do is just to find ways to love yourself more. And that's probably the most profound way I can put it. But secondarily, I'll say to find your purpose, find what you love. It really is. It's as simple as that. What lights you up? What do you get lost in doing? Like I used to get lost in painting for like hours as a child, and I don't do that anymore. And it's something I think about returning to because it brought me so much incredible joy. Now nature is kind of my painting. I love to be in nature. And so find what lights you up. What do you love doing that you get lost in that you could just talk for hours on? And I guarantee you, whatever that is, you can use that to serve other people, to lift them up out of their dark times, their dark moments, their dark beliefs. And you can even, if you're so inclined, you can create a business around it. It's so easy because there are so many people who would love to exchange what we call the energy of money for the energy of your time as a coach and as a mentor and somebody who's walked through that dark valley that they can see themselves having walked through because they're queer, because they're maybe they're disabled in some way, because they've got a relationship issue that identifies with what you've gone through. So really, just find what you love to do. And it all starts with discovery, going within and really feeling what did you really love to do? What do you love to do? And start there. That's the easiest way to do it.
It's what I love about healers. I feel, you've probably heard this before, but they say that religion is for people who are afraid of hell. Spirituality is for people who have been there and who choose love anyway. In order to create a heaven here on earth. I think that sounds like it's true for you. It's definitely true for me. I was burned by the church. And I think that when you've experienced that any sort of hardship, whatever that looks like, or trauma, and you can turn it around and turn that trauma into tribulation and help others so that they have a potentially a more fulfilling journey along the way, is so healing for us. But I mean, it's just, it also introduces us to people like you. I mean, I think that those who value our values gravitate towards us. And so it's so exciting to be a part of the healer community.
Absolutely. 100%.
In that way.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I like to say that technology is homophobic, and today was no exception. It tried to keep us apart.
It's gremlins.
It tried to keep us apart, but gosh darn it, we are gayer and prouder and better healers than we were an hour ago. So take that, homophobic technology. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor. Of course, I'll put everything in the show notes, including information on your bio and your links. Perfect. Where can people buy your book?
Absolutely. Through my website, in the shop on my website, iamkevinlee.com. That's the easiest way. It's on Amazon also, but it's easier through my website.
Amazing. All right, Kevin Lee, thank you so much for your time. Everyone else, thanks for joining us for this. Bye, everybody. For this call, and I will see you next week for our final call of season 1. See you then. Bye.